Welcome to the Anti-Architect Podcast. I am your host, Christian Giordano. As president and owner of the design firm Mancini Duffy, I am driven by a quest for learning and radically changing the industry. With this podcast, I'm hoping to improve the industry that I'm so passionate about by taking a critical look at how architects work through a variety of voices and shared experiences. Sean, thank you so much for taking the time to be my guest here on the Anti-Architect Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So you and I were introduced by a friend of ours, Scott White, who's a fellow YPO member of mine and a client with Mancini. And I believe he introduced you to me as, you need to meet this guy, Sean. He's young, aggressive, and entrepreneurial. I believe that was his exact quote.
Nice.
And I would agree, obviously, since meeting you,
Nice.
That is for sure. But I would say in your profession, you need to have at least two of those three, being aggressive and entrepreneurial
Definitely.
in what you do. And so I want to talk a little bit about recruiting.
Sure.
Right? And what that means. And then we'll get into kind of what it means for architects. But, how do you balance the client that needs people, right? And they need that person now, with finding the right person for an organization, right? With then, of course, you wanting to ultimately be paid for your services,
yeah.
right? Like, hey, I got all these people, they may not be right. Maybe I should put them forward. Maybe I shouldn't, that kind of thing. How do you balance all that? Because it's a hard task.
Yeah, it definitely is. Well, I mean, I think for starters, you got to get to know the client a little bit, right? I think a lot of people, when they come to a recruiter, it's after they've exhausted a few things internally. I mean, think about your own company. You probably have a few people that help with recruiting internally. Maybe there's a talent acquisition person or somebody who takes on those responsibilities. You post jobs online. You have the office executives that are responsible for talent in their office, right? So you exhaust all those things. You ask for referrals, and then you probably go to a staffing firm. Most people are going to try to do it a little bit themselves. So when you get to me, you've missed, a month or two of looking for that person, not having them internally. In architecture, depending on how you bill your jobs, a month or two of billing or a month or two of production. And so now it's like an emergency. And so most people give the staffing firm a job description and then they're off to the races. But that tells like part of the story. Like, you would never hire a great architect who's a bad person, right? Or a really good architect who doesn't fit in with the culture of that office or your company. So I think in the beginning, slowing down a little bit to get to know the details and nuances, not just of the humans that work there, but like what makes Mancini unique versus the 6 other companies that person could go work at, in a 30-mile radius, is important. So I try to slow everything down a little bit.
Okay.
It would be like most people are, I think I use like this waiter waitress example a lot. If you go to like a chain restaurant, they're going to take your order, they're going to bring it to the kitchen, you're going to get some version of what you just ordered. But if you go to a really high-end restaurant, the whole experience, the waiter or waitress plays a big part of that. And we try to be that high-end experience where it's like, all right, cool, I know you said you want a burger, but there's so many things that could go into that to get it to be the very best burger you've ever had anywhere. And we try to take it. That's how you really get to know the company a little bit. Interesting.
Okay, so you need to know the company and the individuals at the company while trying to find that right.
Yeah, because skill sets. If you've been a project architect designing hospitals for 10 years or healthcare systems for 10 years, and you have good tenure, it's likely that you can design healthcare systems. And so I assume some of that. I'm going to ask questions. Based on how you respond, I'm going to get a good feel for the level of knowledge But at the end of the day, you're going to interview that person and decide they really know their architecture or they don't, right?
Okay.
They were a piece of a team or they ran the team. You're going to be able to tell that better than me. What I'm going to be able to tell are the soft skills that are going to make that person successful. How do they communicate? How responsive are they? How did they take the interview seriously? What did they look like when they were presenting themselves? What did their profile look like? Resume, portfolio, those different things. I'm evaluating all. Those are the things that are going to get somebody hired or not hired. Because if you're a 10-year architect doing a specific thing and you have good tenure, likely you're decent enough at that particular thing that the client will see you.
So now I've always find this fascinating, like how do you get the pool of people? Like where do you get these resumes? Is there some sort of secret dark web version of LinkedIn that we don't know about?
No, and yes. So I think Scott, in the way he described me, to me, is a really nice compliment. We are really aggressive.
Yeah.
And if you want people to fill jobs that you've already tried to fill in the way we just described, and with tenure and experience, they're not applying to your job unless they are so unhappy that the only thing they can do at night is go home and apply for jobs because they're just miserable. That's usually not the case. So we have a really good tech stack that we use that my partner Len has put together from different softwares that help us be really aggressive in texting people, LinkedIn messaging people, following up on those without having to just have a memory for it. And then we have different softwares that help us get in touch with people from having, access to contact information, cell phones, emails, things of that nature, where we're actively and aggressively trying to get into that person. But we're also really old school. We're still dialing the phone and calling people. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of people are fishing and waiting for the fish to come to them. And I want to have every access. I have a lot of analogies. My people at my company would make fun of me for this, but we don't want to just chum the water and put lines in. We want to have a crab trap. I want to have a guy with a scuba gear and a harpoon down there, right? Like however we can get in touch with people, we want to be really aggressive doing that.
Okay.
And that is usually what makes the difference. Like if I only call, let's say I have a list of 50 people that I've identified through LinkedIn, through job boards, through our internal software that look good for your job based on paper. In order to get in touch with that person, think about yourself, right? You just had a breakfast this morning. You got children. They have hobbies. I'm sure you'd like to spend time with your friends and your wife and do something for yourself once in a while, right?
Every now and then.
Yeah, right? So you're busy. So if I call you one time on Tuesday, you're not answering your phone. I mean, think about how we got in touch. How many times did I reach out to you, call, email, text, till you finally said, all right, I've had enough. I'll give you a half hour, right?
We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, so I don't mind doing that, right? Because I know from a candidate perspective, they're only switching their job if it's better for them. So the service for the candidate is free, right? We're going to go reach out to that person. We're almost like a sports agent for a quarterback, but we're a sports agent for an architect. And so if you're very busy, you don't have time to go back online at night after your 8-hour day, and your kids have soccer and wrestling, and then you're having dinner with your wife, and now it's 8:00, and you're like, I have to wake up and do this again tomorrow. So we're going to do all the legwork for that candidate once we get in touch with them to tell them about the different companies in the area, what the market says their salary looks like, what the opportunities are, and then we're going to hear what they want. Some people, they want a 9-to-5 job where they're able to clock out at 5:00 and go home and handle family stuff, and that's okay. We got to find an opportunity for them like that. There's other people that want to be more ambitious with their career where they don't have a lot of distractions after 5 and they really want to run and they want a place that's going to let them. We have to align that person with the right job opportunity too. So we got to find out.
So you not only need to know obviously the person seeking that job, you also need to know the company culture that like our company or another company. You need to understand kind of what we're made of as well.
Totally.
To marry those two things up.
Yeah, I have some clients that have tons of flexibility, and they have basically a hybrid schedule where you can kind of work when you need to, as long as you get your work done and it's done by the deadline. They let you have a lot of freedom, and that works for them. And then there's other companies that want a lot of collaboration and want their younger staff to be in office with their senior staff so that they can grow and learn faster and they can answer questions in real time. And so we have to make sure that everything fits, otherwise it'll never be a good match.
Yeah, and so the way we were, I think it's funny the way you described it, right? I think when we think about new hires, we think of them in different ways. I'm curious kind of how you see it.
Sure.
Right? We think of, let's call it we would love to hire a group of graduating seniors, right?
Sure.
Like that's our ideal. If we can groom them as interns, make sure they're pretty decent at what they're learning in school.
Sure.
They're good workers. They have a work ethic, right? It almost is irrelevant where they go to school, and I know that's hard for people to hear. There's certain architecture schools that I think, do better with, and there are certain that we don't. Like we don't do well with an Ivy League school. It's just not, maybe we're not at that level yet. Maybe that's coming.
Could be the candidate pool coming from that.
Could be, right? I mean,
whatever.
It's just what it is, right? So, but we know kind of where that plays, and then we'll take so that's kind of, let's call it a graduating class. That's ideal. We can groom them now for theoretically the rest of their career. And some have stayed actually for we're celebrating 10-year anniversaries right now with a bunch of them, which is great. Then there's more of the strategic, where we have a project, we have a need.
Yeah.
We will sort of put out an email to the firm like, hey, is there anyone that looking to hire, your friends that need to be hired, that kind of thing. And then we go to the recruiter side. And we have a couple of different recruiters, obviously you being one of them. I've had another guy on the podcast that we've used as well.
Yeah, we're trying to get rid of all the other recruiters.
I'm sure. But at the end of the day, I kind of see you all a little bit like a real estate agent, right? People think they can do it themselves.
Sure.
Because they don't want to pay the money up front. But the reality is that when we really need a strategic person, we really can't do that on our own.
Sure.
Like we may or may not know somebody and try and steal them.
Sure.
So how do you find those like needles in a haystack, those strategic people that are they're not in a system, right? They're off the grid in a sense, right?
Yeah.
They're just working quietly at their job. They're really good. They don't have a big, online profile.
Sure.
How do you find all those people?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to aggressiveness. Number one, our business is set up to do that. So the only thing the Axel Group does is work inside of the AE&C industry. So the only people we talk to all day long are architects, engineers, environmental consultants, and then construction and real estate professionals. So it's all in the same world. So we're constantly networking. Inside of that, we're set up geographically so that when we're talking to candidate pools, it's all in the same little candidate pools, whether it's New Jersey, Pennsylvania, down in Florida, whatever. So we set up our business to give us an advantage in that. But to answer your question directly, how do we find the person who's not applying to jobs, who isn't active on LinkedIn or social media, and who is a pretty good employee but too busy to look for a job, right? That's the person you're looking for. And I think it's the aggressiveness through LinkedIn, email, text message, phone calls. And when you're talking to people, you're not just asking them about them, because ultimately they got trained by somebody, they worked underneath somebody, somebody worked underneath them a lot of times. And so when you're talking to them, you can get referrals without actually getting referrals. So like if I said to somebody if somebody called an architect at your company who was reasonably happy and didn't want to leave, and they were talking to him and they just took our phone call, and I said, well, do you know any architects that are looking for a job? Normally the answer is no, I don't know any architects that are looking for a job. But they know a ton of architects. Yeah. Obviously, they're sitting next to architects all day. So if you reframe the question, it's like, hey, you have a 10-year career there. Who's been the biggest influence on your career there? And they say, well, Christian's been the biggest influence on my career there. Well, why has Christian been the biggest influence on you? They love talking about themselves. They love talking about people that have helped them.
Smart.
And so they go through that. Hey, you got promoted recently. Who backfilled your job? Oh, well, it was Jessica. She worked for me for 3 years. I was so happy to see her get this job. And so without actually saying Jessica's really good and an up-and-comer and Christian's a really good leader, I just got 2 leads.
Sure.
So now I can look you guys up on your profiles or get your names, or even if you're not on LinkedIn, like you said, I call into the company, your reception answers the phone, and I say, may I speak to Jessica? 99% of people are just passing me to Jessica.
Sure.
And so I get their name, I get their voicemail, I get their phone number, whatever the case is. So
okay.
You have to be strategic in how you're asking the questions. If I just say, give me a referral, you say, no, I don't know anybody. But if we start asking real questions about your career, you'll tell us things.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that. So now here's something that I struggle with as our company has grown, like myself or my partner, Bill, or maybe a few other partners, we met and interviewed every single person, right? And now that we've gotten bigger, it's impossible to do, right?
Totally.
We have 7 offices. There's just a lot going on.
Different states, different times, whatever.
Exactly. And, you need to put trust in, obviously, the people that are doing the hiring. What kind of advice do you have for someone like me where I still want to be somewhat involved? I want to at least know the person or meet them or along in the process, that kind of thing. But
Sure.
I can't be the one that's looking at the portfolio or really determining, like, do we need this person or not, right?
Sure.
I'm relying now on our executive team
right.
to pull that off.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you need a standard and a process. So like, let's take your new office in Tampa. Whoever the interview team is there should be the interview team all the time. So if it's maybe a lower level person to have the pulse on the younger crew, a mid-level management, and your executive of that office, right? That might be the interview process. And a lot of people want to go lowest to highest in the interview. I actually think it somewhat wastes time, because if the first two people love them and you meet them and hate them, you're never hiring that person.
Yeah.
You're not like, I'm totally wrong and you guys are right, so you guys hire them, right? So what I do for my company is I take the first 15-minute phone call and I'm just gauging personality and communication skills. I literally, and I start every conversation the same way. So if anybody's listening and ever interviews with me, it's the same thing. Hey, I want to take this call to just get to know you off the piece of paper. We're going to spend 10 minutes talking about you. Tell me about your friends, family, and hobbies, and anything you want me to know.
Interesting.
And my favorite people are like, all right, well, my name's Sean. I'm 22 years old. I live at the Jersey Shore. Like things that are obvious, but they're basically just setting up their story to tell me the rest.
Right.
A lot of people go, well, I just graduated college and I worked for 2 years as an intern here. And I don't want to know that. I see that on the piece of paper.
Right.
So to me, that's listening skills. And that's how you're going to get, hey, Christian was my mentor and Jessica was the best manager who I promoted. Person who's a really good listener and who communicates well. So I'm looking for that. So back to your question, I say you have to have a standard of who's going to interview them and what they're looking for, and you have to have a process that's efficient to get those people. So, if your executive in that office is your trusted person, I would probably start with them for 15 to 20 minutes in a culture-based conversation. Because if the portfolio looks good, likely it's okay enough. Yeah. And then from there, I'd run the rest of your process, because you're probably going to be able to eliminate a lot of people that way.
Okay, that's good. Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Yeah, and then that's really what I'm looking for is culture.
Yeah.
Right? I'm assuming that if we're interviewing this person for a specific job, for a specific task or project or whatever it might be, that they have that skill set. Right? I'm not gonna ask, what version of Revit are you,
Yeah, because who really cares about?
Doesn't really matter to me. But I do care, and I know this doesn't sound great, but I do care how they present themselves, what they look like.
Definitely.
How they dress. They don't have to dress. They don't have to, have a suit and tie on, that's for sure. But are they presentable? Can they be put in front of a client kind of thing? Is that even the job for them? Maybe it's not, So I'm trying to assess those kind of things, and will they fit in with what our ultimate goal is we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I think that's not unique to you or Mancini. I think most people want people that take care of themselves and try to be a good professional. And then that's what I'm screening for, right? Because I'm not really sure if they're a good architect. I know enough to know that they're a bad architect or they don't do things, right? But I'm relying on the professional in any industry that I work in to tell me they're good. Or if I miss on, hey, the person came and they were sloppy in the interview process, they weren't prepared, and they didn't take this seriously, that's unacceptable. If you said, listen, I dove into their technical capabilities and they really focused on 1/3 of the job, I can live with that, right? That's going to be difficult for me to uncover. So I think that's normal. I think, and one thing I struggle with this too, we're not obviously at your size, but no one's going to do it your way, right? Like you're 10 out of 10, right? That's how that goes. And so when someone else does it, you're always going to see something that's not perfect or not the way Christian would have did it, or I would have wrote that email a little different. That's impossible for me to give advice on how to let that go. Yeah. You're just going to have to trust that sometimes it's going to work out.
Yeah, that is. I've talked about that on this podcast.
It's super hard.
It's that ability to let go is something that I have spent now 10 plus years working on.
Yeah, right? And we're still talking about it.
I believe me, there's sometimes I want to jump across the table and tell the client, no, forget what they just said. We're going to do it this way kind of thing. But you learn to, either interject where you have to, or you learn to just kind of live with it and then talk to that person afterward. Yeah. Or you also learn, well, maybe the way I was going to do it isn't necessarily the right way, and they figured it out.
And that worked out just fine.
Working out fine, so I should just shut up more.
Yeah, I learned that a little bit too. You got to let people make their own mistakes, but also sometimes they don't make a mistake, and it's done well.
Interesting. So, sorry. If you had to pick one thing, what annoys you most about working with architects and engineers?
I was thinking about this a little bit. I guess I'd have to say that it's because they're a really good architect or engineer, they also think that they're good at everything else. So they're very involved in the hiring process and how that's going to go. It's their company. Obviously, they're going to be involved. But for a company of 100 people-ish, right, how many interviews and offers could somebody hire in a year? Is it 15? Is it 30 in a really big year? And so you're going to do 50 interviews. My company conducts 10 phone interviews per person per week at a minimum, right? And so we're doing hundreds and hundreds of interviews a week. And so we just have a different view. And I also have perspective into 500 different companies around the country of how they interview in their processes. So what annoys me, I guess, with clients is that they don't let me do my job all the way. And so if they would step back after we discuss exactly what they want and then took some advice on what would get them the person they want once we find them, I think we'd have a lot more success.
Okay.
Sometimes they get.
So let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
So in terms of what would get, some more success, is it better benefits? Is it, just describe some things that you see.
Yeah, it's usually none of those things. So do you have to have a decent benefit package? Yes. Does the salary have to be appropriate for the person? Yes. Do you have to have reasonable all those things that are like kind of table stakes that everybody has? Yes. Okay. Right? And bagels on Fridays and, one happy hour a quarter doesn't change bad benefits, bad money, bad culture. Okay. So the same thing that you said that you're looking for, that you're hiring, did the person come on time? Did they have a good portfolio? Were they dressed properly? Did they take this seriously? Could they communicate and handle themselves in front of the client? Is exactly what the candidate's looking for on your side. So as an example, I'm working with a recruiter and I send over the resume. We can't interview for 12 business days. I mean, that's right. That's crazy. That's 2.5 weeks from time we found the candidate to an interview. So the person doesn't feel the job is very important. They go on the interview and the interviewer is 15 minutes late and doesn't address why they were late when they walk into the interview. That doesn't feel very good. They sat in a lobby that wasn't really a lobby. It was a half a lobby and nobody came and checked on them. That doesn't feel good. They go into the interview and it's a Q&A interrogation as opposed to a human conversation. That doesn't feel very good. And so it's this whole process where you're going to get to ask your questions. But at the end of asking all your questions, if you decide, wow, I really like Jessica, I want her on my team, it's everything you already did for 2 hours that gets her to say no.
Interesting.
The dollars will be close. The benefits will be close. All that's kind of pre-negotiated once they get to the table. Sure. Like we're close there. But it's everything else. Like I had an experience with a client who's one of our bigger clients, and this gentleman runs this division of their company. And he was telling us he was having trouble hiring people on his own, separate from us, that they were getting to the offer stage and not accepting. And he's like, do you guys have any opinions on this? And so this is always hard for me because, like, how much opinion do you actually want? Right. Right. Am I going to insult you? Right. Or, and he's like, no, man, like, just please tell me the truth. And I said, all right, well, I sat in your lobby. That was a lobby where there was a bell who somebody used to work there. I rang the bell. When the person came to answer the door to get me, they looked like I just inconvenienced them, like to talk to me. They were very short. And then I sat there for 15 minutes waiting for you. When they came, I watched 10 people walk by me. Out of 10, this is a true story, one person stopped and said, hey, are you guys being helped? Everybody else was on their phone or had headphones in, didn't even acknowledge we existed, walked straight in the door, shut the door. How do I feel now wanting to work here? I just watched your culture. Yeah. Right? So now same experience. The lady answers the door after the ring. Hey, how you guys doing? Who are you here to see? Oh, I'm here to see Christian. Oh, let me go get him for you. Have a seat. Do you guys need anything? You need water or coffee? How far did you come? You need the bathroom? Yeah. No, we're good. All right, let me go get Christian. Comes back. Hey, Christian's going to be 15 minutes. He's just wrapping up a call. Are you sure there's nothing I can get you? And then 10 people walk by and everybody says, hey, good morning. How you doing? Are you being helped? Right. All of a sudden, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. Yeah. And so I had this experience at my personal company. We had a very small office 2 years ago or 3 or 4 years ago where you walked in and you kind of were just in the pit. And people would walk in and everybody just thought everybody would say hi. And so nobody said hi. And so I got so aggravated one time. I said, from now on, every time somebody walks in, everybody in the whole company gets up. There's 15 of us. gets up and says hi to this person and shakes their hand. So it became so overwhelming that like it was funny.
Right.
But it was better than nobody talking to them.
Right.
And so I think that whole process, if I could help my clients win the person, that's just like you want somebody who's going to go in front of your client. I think that's key.
It's great. That is great advice. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is going to be required listening for everyone
good.
in my office.
Nice.
Including myself. I'm thinking back as you're talking, like, do I do that? And I'll tell you the reason where some of this comes in, right? Sometimes what'll happen with a recruiter will push someone, right?
Sure.
And say, I just met this person, you have to meet them. But we're not hiring for that position. Well, just meet them anyway.
Sure.
Because they're so great. And I go, but I really don't have time to meet with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's where that comes in. And now it's 2 weeks from now I can meet with them because now we're trying to wedge something in that I didn't necessarily
you didn't really want
the
it
beginning, right?
Totally.
But then, now that when you're saying that, I either need to be more straightforward and say, absolutely not meeting that person.
Yeah, I'm never hiring this person right now, regardless of how wonderful they are.
Exactly.
So let's not waste each other's time.
Let's not that. Or if I am going to say yes, sure, then I need to make it happen to show that respect because that has a ripple effect, as our company sort of out in the marketplace kind of thing. Which is really interesting.
And when you're saying hiring, like when you give the recruiter an assignment, that's different than a proactive person that I just think is awesome and thought of Mancini for.
Right.
Those are different conversations, but when you give us an assignment, remember back to the beginning of our conversation, we only get paid when we make a placement that's successful.
Right.
So if you give us an assignment, the recruiter that's working on it too, they get to know my clients. Mm-hmm. And so if this client is really responsive, they hire the people that they say they're going to hire, they make fair offers in the range that they gave us, my recruiting team is more excited to work on that job. So not that they try harder or less hard, but if you have a client that you always get the business, they're really easy to work with, they pay a fair rate.
Right.
You're like, let's go.
Yeah.
Right? They get the best.
Yeah.
And then, so my recruiters start to know, like, hey, when we work with XYZ company, man, I know I'm making a placement. They value our service. So they're lining up, begging for that client.
Right.
And now you're just getting their best effort.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that. So one of the things I wrote down is, why are architects so good at storytelling when it comes to their projects, their buildings, their interiors, sort of weaving a great storyline, but not as good about telling their own story in an interview?
I think the first part is probably because a good architect's a little bit like an artist, right? And so they have a mind for that, and so they're getting to explain it. But a lot of architects are, I don't know if introverted is the right word, but they're definitely not extroverted or braggadocious or anything like that. And so when you're talking about yourself, oftentimes it can feel like you're bragging. And so talking about your own accomplishments is not something most people are used to doing.
Right.
So I think it's a little bit of that.
A little bit of both, yeah. So us architects we're infamous for being overworked, underpaid.
It is one of the lower salaried jobs that I service, for sure, actually. That is true.
Yeah, so that was really my question is this something that we've just accepted on our own, or do you think it's something that we can change in kind of how this works?
Yeah, I think it depends on how valuable the client you're working with sees you to the process. I know sometimes the architect is early on with a developer or an owner and picks the whole project team. Mm-hmm. And in that case, that person's extremely valuable and they're almost running the job like a CM firm or a owner's rep might, where they're really picking the whole thing. I think in that case, you're really valuable and probably worth a lot more. In some cases, where they're brought onto the project team and some architects can get in the way of the design or the finances of that job by designing something that's not buildable in reality based on either the budget or the location or timeline or things like that. So, but it is funny that you say that, because I do see architects as less compensated than some of your counterparts in engineering or different consulting services.
Yeah, so that was my follow-up to that is, so engineers get paid better. Who else gets paid better than architects?
Pretty much everybody, but maybe environmental scientists.
That's great. That's hilarious.
I like your entry-level civil engineer. If you graduate college with a civil engineering degree in the tri-state area, you're getting your first job out of college probably in the 65K range, like
Okay.
with no just sitting for your EIT, nothing yet. If you work, same person works in construction, they might get 70, 72 as their first job.
Okay.
An architect's probably getting somewhere between 55, 58, 60.
Yeah.
Right? So it's 10% or 20% lower in some cases. I
Yeah.
don't know. And then that's just how the rest of the career goes.
It's interesting because there's a food chain also, right? And architects are higher up in the food chain on many of those. But
Yeah.
I see a lot of the engineers that I know, financially, their companies are, their revenues are higher, their profits are higher,
Sure.
right? That kind of thing, and in proportion. So it's interesting to see kind of how we have sort of a status, but then we're not sort of fulfilling that status
Yeah.
on the compensation side.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. It's been like that since I got into this industry.
Listen, unfortunately for us, right, my partner, Bill, and I joke about this, that if we go for a corporate interiors job, you're pricing it per square foot. And that per square foot number is basically the same per square foot number as it's been 10 years ago, could even be 15 years
Sure.
ago. And we're obviously paying people more,
Way more.
costs are up, that kind of thing. I don't think architects keep up with inflation in terms of their raises. We try in our company to make sure everyone is compensated well, but it's hard, right? When you're getting the same fee you were 15 years ago, you have to figure out another way of doing it.
Definitely. And I don't know, I don't have a good answer for that, but I do think that pushing the envelope a little bit on that, and, you know, I'm sure that I run a business also, right? So there's different business reasons why I would take a smaller fee somewhere over a bigger fee somewhere. But, you know, if you get more clients that really need this service and you do a good job and you can charge a good rate for it, it's better than having a bunch of clients that you can't pay as much for just to have the busy work.
Exactly.
So-
And listen, a lot of it balances out, right? Some of that's corporate interior is very prescribed, right? You're
Right.
per square foot, and you either do that job or you don't, right?
Sure.
For that number, because the next guy is going to do it for that number or a little bit less.
Right.
And then you've got the architecture side. If it's a new building, it's a large project, it's a campus, whatever it might be.
Sure.
Those fees can then help supplement and carry a lot of the other work. So you have to balance all that out.
Definitely. We do the same thing. We do the same thing on our end in balancing our clients and things like that.
What is your opinion on, let's call it, the next generation or the generation of architects and engineers that are coming out of school right now? Is there the millennials were a certain way and the whatever, right? What do you see kind of coming out of school?
I think as a general comment, I don't think people want to work the way that they used to want to work. Even people want a lot of things they haven't earned yet, in my opinion. Right? I say this. I have my wife's cousin is an architect, graduated from Thomas Jefferson, I think, in Philly, and I had a conversation with him. He works from home. He works for a guy who lives like 10 states away. They hardly talk. They talk over Zoom. And he wants to leave to get new experience, but he doesn't want to go to the office. And my whole thing is like, if you really want to be an architect, and I would say this about any industry, how are you learning alone? Everything I learned in staffing, I learned sitting in an office by the people that were next to me, above me, in a different like in my company that did something I wanted to do. And like I watched how they handled situations. I was able to ask them questions live. I was able to work through things without totally falling on my face because someone was right there to say, actually, at this step, go here.
Yeah.
And I think that's key to young professionals in any industry growing their careers. And I don't think they value that mentorship or camaraderie or visibility in their office. So I think that's one. I think people lack communication skills. Like they don't know how to really conversate because they've been like this for so long.
Yeah.
So I think I always laugh. Like if I could go back and I wanted to be in a professional, like technical industry, I would go be a civil engineer and architect because I have the personality skills and the communication skills that if I knew how to be an architect or knew how to be a civil engineer, I'd get all the business because I'd be able to meet these guys where they're at, and you could put me in front of a client by the time I was 25.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't do well in a cubicle.
Yeah. Honestly, that's how I have succeeded, right?
Yeah.
Is being able to just talk to people and be normal and talk about projects. And I'm a good designer. I'm not the greatest designer.
Sure.
I'm not a great technical person, but I could figure it out. And I relied on other people to to, make sure that those things were correct.
Yeah.
But it really is about selling yourself and now at this point selling our firm and selling the people that I do trust that are really good designers,
Sure.
and are really good technical, that I know are behind us backing everything up that we do.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be where I was if I couldn't just simply communicate.
It's a vastly undervalued skill, in my opinion. And, you said one thing that I've talked to a bunch of my friends who have businesses about. You said, I'll figure it out. I have to figure it out, Gene. Like I just know I'll figure it. Even if I don't know what to do, I know who knows what to do, how to get in touch with that person, where to ask, when to push, when to try, when to figure it out on my own, when I need to figure it out with my team. I think that's a big skill a lot of people need to realize is like, just get it done.
Yeah.
And I think that'll help them.
Yeah. So are you seeing still a lot of work from home, like pure work from home jobs?
No.
Okay.
There was, over the last couple of years, it's come back to mainly in the office. There are some work from home, a day here or 2 days, but generally it's some version of either a little bit of hybrid or in the office now.
Okay.
Most places.
We allow work from home a couple days a week if
Yeah.
that's what you want. We'd rather you be in the office. We do think it supports a better office culture. We do think it's good for the younger people to be there.
Definitely.
I joke mostly it's our middle management group that wants to work from home. They've already done their dues coming into the, especially if it's New York City. You see our other offices that are more local, that it's easier to get to.
Right.
You can drive up, park, get out of your car. It doesn't take you an hour
Yeah,
and a
it's
half
20
to get
minutes,
there.
right.
That's a whole different ballgame. I mean, I get why New York City is a royal pain in the ass to go in and out.
I'm sure it's a mess.
So, but the office is much more busy these days, which is great. And I think, I don't think you'll see a 5-day a week work week, throughout cities like Manhattan.
Sure.
But you're seeing a 4-day pretty strong work week. It's Fridays that are pretty dead.
Yeah, and I think you can get away with that and keep a lot of the stuff we talked about with company culture and work ethic and camaraderie and learning. But it's when it's 3 or 4 days a week and you never overlap with that manager because you want to come in Tuesdays and they come in on Thursdays. And so I think, Fridays from home, no big deal. I also think having flexibility for your life is like a good way to manage it. Like just being an adult, like if you have things happening on a Tuesday at 10 a.m., go take care of things on Tuesday at 10 a.m.
Absolutely.
But also, if your work's not finished, you got to get your work finished, right?
Yeah, and pre-COVID, we were always like that. If you had something to do, you had a kid thing, you were a working mom, you had whatever, your kid's soccer game.
Yeah.
Go do it. Get
Totally.
back on the computer at night and finish your stuff.
That's right. I think that's important. Like, I don't miss my son's wrestling practice.
Yeah.
But I'll work from 7 to 8 o'clock at night after dinner's done if I have to.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think that's important.
So I want to talk a little bit about your company, the Axel Group.
Yeah.
You have your tagline, anything but typical.
Yep.
What does that actually mean, like when you're working with an architectural firm?
Yeah, I actually have anything but typical tattooed on my leg.
Nice.
So it originated from wrestling. So I'll give you like the little origin story and then why we use it. So when we were in high school, my wrestling coach took over the team when I was a sophomore. My freshman year, we were like 5-15. We weren't very good. And the coach was there for a long time. And this is the story later, he told our coach when he got the team that, hey, you're going to have really tough kids from Bayville, but they're just typical Bayville boys. Like they'll work hard, but don't expect too much from them. And he didn't really like that. He was like, why do they have this label? And so our tagline was anything but typical. And then my junior and senior year, we won 2 state titles as a team.
Nice.
In wrestling. So we went from 5-15 to top 10 in the state 2 years in a row in high school wrestling. And so before the state finals, my junior year, he told that story. And his message was, if you got to believe in yourself. Why can't a kid from Bayville be as good as a kid from Brick or Toms River or Jackson or any other place?
Sure.
And so I kind of kept that message close to my heart a little bit, just as I've grown. Like, why not me? Why can't I be good? Why do I have to live the way I grew up? Why can't I have more different experiences or better? And so when I started this company with my business partner, Len, who also wrestled on that same team in high school, it just made sense for us to because that's kind of been for me a little bit of a guiding light of like, you can do it. You can be different. It doesn't have to be that way. And so, back to the staffing part, like the typical staffing firm is the waiter at Outback, And, we're not that way. The typical staffing firm just lets you do anything you want. I want to give advice as a consultant on the way that we're both going to get what we want most successfully, fastest. And the best companies want that. They want to get exactly what they asked for and make it super easy on them. They don't want to, if you're going to pay me a premium fee to do something, if you let me do it all the way, you go back to doing everything else you were doing, and I just need your schedule an hour here, an hour there to do interviews.
Right.
I'll do everything else. I'll concierge the whole process. So we don't want to be your typical staffing firm where we're order takers and then we throw resumes and hope you pick one.
Yeah.
So we try to do things a little bit differently.
I like that. So you have what's called your 3-step screening process, right? And I think you touched a little bit about this, right? It's your phone interview, your face-to-face, and then your reference checks.
Yep.
I guess what's the one thing in that process that you'll see an architect kind of gloss over or miss in kind of an interview, or if you've pre-screened them? What are we missing on the questions in there?
You're asking that from when you're interviewing the people, or what the candidate is missing?
What's the candidate missing?
Yeah. I think that people generally, how they are is generally how they always are. So I would imagine if you're this way in business, you're probably this way a little bit in your life. You probably have an organized household. You probably plan certain things, right? Making some assumptions. A lot of people, how they are is just how they are in anything. I coach my wrestling teams, my little kid wrestling teams, like I run my business. I know that sounds funny, but these kids put a lot of time into it. They want to win. There's a way you have to work in order to have success. And so trying to get them to learn that as fast as possible will give them a better chance to have success. So in this, I don't think it's one part of that process. I think it's what they don't realize is what we're doing in that process is we're trying to task them with very small things that you don't even notice that will fatigue you if you're not serious. So you have to be on time for your phone call. You have to answer questions. When you're done, you have to send a resume and a portfolio. So you now have to after that conversation, you have to remember to send an email with the resume and a portfolio. But you're also going to write something in that email. So I'm going to see how you communicate now written.
Sure. Then
we're going to go on the virtual interview. And so I'm going to see, what does your background look like? Are you dressed properly? Did you take this seriously? Did you prepare for it? And so I'm tasking them with these tiny little things that are going to give me a little bit of an insight of how they're going to be when they're working on your client, on your business, and you're not sitting in that office, right? You're traveling to your meetings and trying to grow the company. And this guy's left in his cubicle by himself. How is he going to manage and communicate with your client? I'm trying to see that. And so if they're not that serious about moving forward, or they're really not good at those things, it will show up through each of those steps more than the full phone call and the full interview and the full reference.
Sure.
It's just getting them to do that can be fatiguing if they're not serious or good at it.
Do you ever think about going to an architecture school and engineering school and teaching a course on this?
I would love to do that. I think I could talk about this forever. I think that like the part of the reason that people struggle to get jobs is not because they're not good at it. They don't know how to go through. It's a little bit of a skill to go through this process.
Yeah.
And I would love to do that.
So yeah, I'm gonna mention that to a couple.
Yeah.
So how did you start your company? But I guess more importantly is, how did you get into this profession? I can't imagine you were wrestling one day in high school and was like, hey, I'd like to be a recruiter.
Maybe in staffing. Yeah. Right. No. I totally on accident. When I was at Rutgers, I wrestled at Rutgers, and one of the athletic directors who was actually still there, he just got the athletic director job at Rowan. Sean Tucker is his name. His job at Rutgers at the time was to help athletes get jobs after college. It was like a new thing they started my senior year. So basically, I got an interview at a staffing firm. And in the interview, I needed a job that had a little bit of a salary. I literally had no money. And like by no money, I mean like I didn't have a credit card and I had like less than $200 in my checking account, like actually no money. So I was like, I have to get a job. And my wife, we've been married 11 years, went to senior prom together 18 years. Her father, super successful. The deal was if I got a job, I could live at their house and not pay rent. So now I have to get a job because I don't have to pay rent and I can live somewhere that's really nice. And we were together for, at that point, almost 5 or 6 years. So that was, the path we were on. So I did that. But so I went to a staffing firm, and in the interview, the guy I interviewed with, he basically said, you get paid more if you do better. And it doesn't matter if you're here for 1 year or 5 years. If you make more placements, you make more money. And if you're better, you'll get promoted first. And I was like, cool, sign me up for that. Like, it was wrestling. If you're a freshman or a senior,
doesn't matter.
Well, there's no opinion. Your mom's not on the PTA. Your dad's not the coach. You and me are going to wrestle. One of us are going to score more points and win.
Right.
So no one can go, well, Christian's better than Sean. Well, Sean beat him by 8 points.
Right.
So Christian's not better.
Right.
And you can say, well, he's a better first baseman or a better right fielder or a better left tackle.
Sure.
And so it felt like wrestling to me, where I could control a lot of my own destiny with a team aspect. And so I thought it sounded good. I got into that. They hired me. I recruited for 10 months. I fell into this industry. It's what I got hired in, but it was non-technical. So it was like labor, field techs, low-level drafting, heavy equipment operators, things like that.
Okay.
And
for
then,
like a big, like...
Huge staffing firm.
Okay.
Yeah. The biggest privately owned staffing firm in the country.
Okay.
And then they promoted me to sell technical A, E, and C.
Okay.
And they had did it as a company, but they didn't do it here locally. And so at the time, I was 23 years old. They gave me a territory. It was Monmouth, Middlesex, and Mercer County. And they're like, all right, build a territory and sell it. And I was like, cool, how do I do that? They're like, you Google companies and write down their names. Now, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. I was like, no way. Like, even at 23, I was like, this doesn't sound like the best way to do this.
Right. And some manual.
There was nothing. Literally, I Googled companies. I wrote them. I still have the old tear sheet. Like, I wrote it on like a bad Excel file, like handwritten. Mm-hmm. And this was not like in the 80s, right? This was 2012. And I started cold calling. And at the same time, people had gotten promoted around the same time that I did. And they got promoted to territories that either someone quick got fired or promoted, which at the time didn't feel good because mine was bare and I had to build it literally from the first phone call. And they walked into relationships. And so in staffing, they made more money than me the first year and a half. I was super jealous of that. I didn't feel like it was fair. But I was young and didn't look at it the right way. So I built that territory from scratch. So I really had to get to know the relationships. And at the time, it was horrible. But if you fast forward, I became one of the top salespeople in that office, one of the top salespeople in the region, and me and my boss didn't get along, and they fired me.
Oh, wow.
So, when my wife was 4 months pregnant with my son. So it was like perfect timing.
Sure.
I walked in on a Monday night after hitting my bonus and doing really well. And I think it was like January 16th. I was right at the turn of the year. And I got fired on a Wednesday or Thursday night or something like it was a Monday. It was a Monday because I was doing the basement with my father-in-law. And I remember the whole thing where I was at. So anyway, it was horrible. I was embarrassed. I was pissed, sad. Pick a word.
Sure.
And so I got fired. And then I got it. One of my clients found out I had gotten fired and offered me a job to do BD for them at an environmental and engineering consulting company. And so I did that for 18 months. And while I was there, the company was Envirotactics. This guy, Chris Neufer, is the owner of it, local guy in Seagirt. Super nice guy, great at his business. I don't know if this is just my opinion of this, but when he was young, he wanted to surf in the summer and ski in the winter, and so nobody would pay him to do that, so he started his own company. And as his life grew, his business grew, and he got hobbies and a wife and kids and a house and college, and so his business grew.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this guy run his business, and he's super nice, great at what he did. If you ever need an environmental consultant, he's the man. He's great. But I was like, he had what I consider now to be like more of a lifestyle business. He built it around his lifestyle.
Sure.
And I didn't want that. I wanted to just treat business like wrestling, see what I could accomplish with it. If I can go to college, that's high level. If I can wrestle D1, that's higher level. If it's at Rutgers, that's higher level. And just see what I could accomplish and where it would take me. And so I was there for a while, and I was just like, man, I'm watching him run his business, and I'm also watching him live his life. And I was like, I could do this. Like, I never needed someone to be like, did you make your phone calls? I needed strategy, but I didn't need like babysitting. And I wasn't really happy there. Nothing to do with them. I just didn't feel like fulfilled there. And so I quit my job there, and I started the Axel Group in August of 2017 after my non-compete was up. And what was horrible in the beginning of building that territory from scratch was amazing later because I actually built relationships with these people, and I wasn't forced into this transactional, hey, I need a placement right now. Mm-hmm. There was no agreement. There was no placement to need. They never used my staffing firm. And so I got to know these people. And then when I started my own company, they were willing to give me a shot because they didn't like my old company. They liked Sean. And I wasn't forced into those transactional relationships. So that horrible way of building a territory in 2012 turned out to be the reason we were able to get off the ground, 10 years later.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
It's a great
It didn't
story.
feel amazing at the time. But
that is a great story. So where did you grow up and what was your childhood like?
yeah, I grew up in Bayville, down by Tom's River. Childhood was fine. When I got to high school, my mom left.
What high school did you go to?
Central Regional.
Okay.
And, that's a big part of my story because, I have all these positive things, my wrestling, my friends. Like, I have 3 guys that were in my wedding that work at my company now.
Oh, wow.
A couple of these guys that are my friends, we went to kindergarten together. Like, the one guy, Joe, in my office, he's been our top salesperson the last couple of years.
That's awesome.
He was my very first friend ever, like, in kindergarten, like, on the first day.
It's rare to see that.
It's super rare, right? And so now 30 years later, like, literally, we're still working together. So, like, I had all these positive things, like great friend group, great wrestling group. My dad was is a really good guy, like all that. And then my mom had her demons and left, and she had a drinking problem that overtook her and
Sorry to hear.
Yeah, thanks. And she just couldn't get out of it, and so she left. But that created all types of problems. My dad she had the benefits, and so when she left, I think I was probably a sophomore in high school-ish, and my sister's in 7th grade, my brother's in 4th or 5th grade at the time, and my dad actually went to UPS to load trucks from like 2 a.m. till 8 a.m. to get health benefits, because back then if you were part-time they'd give you health benefits.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't have health benefits. And then he had a small painting business.
Wow.
And so like this guy literally, he retired like 3 years ago from UPS with a pension, even though it was part-time. He was there for like 19 years. He worked from 2 a.m. till 8 o'clock in the morning, and then he painted till 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So like we had to get ourselves to school, we had to get ourselves to practice, and he did the best he could, right? Like that. But I watched a lot of work ethic from him, but not a lot of money, right? Because he was loading trucks part-time. Like, what did they pay you? $10 an hour.
Right.
And then painting. Enough to pay basic bills, but like you're not going to a wrestling club. You're not getting a new pair of wrestling shoes, that kind of thing. And then I met my wife. We went to senior prom together, and her father's extremely successful, builds hotels and high-rises. Started the company when he was like 30. Now he's the executive vice president, like runs, all these different types of jobs. Super successful. They both worked their tail off. This guy made a couple different decisions than this guy, and life worked out different.
Right.
So when I met him at 18, I was like, yeah, this is way better than that. This is obviously better than that, right? So by being exposed to him, I got to be around people that he knew. And when I met these people, I'm like, they're not that good or that smart or that special. They just made a couple of good decisions. They worked their tail off. They stayed in it when it got difficult and fought through some adversities.
Sure.
And now look at the lifestyle that they have. So I was like, it was a blessing to be exposed to both, because I watched my dad have things not go his way. And then instead of just, because he could have easily said, all right, I'm out too, right? Life is too hard. Instead, he just sucked it up, went to work at 2, like who does that? He went to work at 2 a.m. to load trucks at 50. Like that's not how I'm sure he saw his life going. Just so his kids had what they needed, which is super hard. I learned a lot of hard work from him. It's really admirable that he just sucked, never complained about it. Never once, I don't ever remember once him saying like, I have to do this for you. Like he just did it because that's what it required of him to run his family.
Right.
And then I watched him, my father-in-law, do different things, and I got to see both sides. And so when I met these people that were really successful or lived in these big houses or were members at these places, and you thought they were like unattainable, you meet them and you're like, he's just like me. I could do this. Yeah. And so it gives you the confidence to, try it.
It's a great story. Do you worry that your kids
oh my God,
will have, sort of a, I don't want to say privileged upbringing, but an upbringing that doesn't have as much struggle
definitely.
As it's something I worry about too, right?
Ton.
It's that life is kind of easy, right? And
life is not kind of easy, right? By comparison. So
right.
Yes.
What are you going to do? Screw up your kids, upbringing just to
teach them some lessons? No, yeah, it's hard. But I'll tell you, I take sports. Sports taught me so much. And I push sports into both of them. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens my son happens to also like wrestling, so we get to do that together. But he's a tireless worker, and he's learning failure through the efforts of wrestling. Like, because it's not that I think it's the best sport, but like you have to, in order to train wrestling and to win at wrestling, you're fighting another person and you're both tired and it's to get good at it, you have to train it under duress.
Yep.
And so it teaches you things about yourself that are hard to learn unless you have a lot of adversity.
Yeah.
And, you know, and then also like with my daughter, she's really into soccer, and she's young, but pushing them to train and be around those types of people and those types of kids and the parents of those types of kids where they take sports seriously, they take training seriously, they want their kids to grow up. And it's also good physical fitness, learn how to defend yourself, get different social circles, communicate with people on your own when they're coaching you. And some kids are better than you, some kids are worse than you. You have to be a good teammate and pick them up. You have to go learn and get better. That is where I hopefully he will get, and my daughter will get their adversity training.
I totally agree. I think sports is great. Both my kids do sports, and like one of my kids actually dives in a club team at Rutgers.
Yeah, you're right.
And you know that's a tough sport, right? It's all you. You're being judged on every little toe and
if you're a little out of line
in a way. And then my other daughter does acting and singing, and I think it's like 99% of what she tries out for, she gets rejected for. And that's normal.
Yeah.
That's just pretty
typical. And it doesn't stop her from going to the next audition.
Yeah, you can't get upset after everyone because it happens to everybody, right? It's just even A-list actors get rejected on.
Yeah.
So
it's good to teach them the journey of it because it's something that I'm even learning. Like the journey of this is as important as the destination, if maybe not even more important. And, I posted a picture on my social a year ago. My son went to a tournament in wrestling, and he 1 year earlier than last July. At that same tournament, same age group, same everything, he went 0-9. He didn't even score a point. And at the very last match after he lost and went 0-9, he sat on the side of the mat with his hands over his head, with his head between his legs, for like 5 or 6 minutes. And there's nothing to say. Like, he's not done. He knows he went 0-9. You can't be like, well, you did good. No, you didn't do. You didn't do good, right? I can't even change it. But you got to get up, you got to go to practice, you got to go to work if you want that feeling to change. The very next year, 1 year later, same tournament, same age group, everything, he went 10-2.
Oh, wow.
And I kept that picture and I showed him that picture. And I'm like, this was 12 months of work. This wasn't 12 years of work.
Yeah.
Look at the changes, look at the progression. Like, we're going to go through, this is going to happen again. We're going to go 0-9 again, right? Because we're going to keep stretching our ability. And then if you quit, that's where you stay. If you work through it, you'll get better. Yeah. And so you got to teach them that as fast as possible.
Tell us a little bit about your wrestling career at Rutgers.
Oh, man.
And how you got there. And
yeah.
Because you accomplished a lot.
Yeah, I did. But you know what? If you look at my teammates at Rutgers, I was probably the least credentialed guy on the team. And one of the things that kept me on that team, and if you ask Coach Goodale, randomly, he's the head coach. It's his birthday today, randomly. Okay. But if you asked him what kept me on that team, he would probably tell you I was on every group. So I was on the student government. I was on the athletic advisor committee. I was on dean's list. I got good grades. I wasn't a pain in the neck as far as, he'd probably tell you I was a little bit of a pain in the neck. But I was good for the locker room. I helped the guys out. I worked hard. Right? So I had to earn my spot because I didn't have the same credentials as a lot of these guys. But wrestling taught me a lot, man. Like, it got me through really difficult times in my life, but it also got me exposed to some of my best. I mean, we met Scott. I met you through Scott. I met Scott through Rutgers.
He's a huge Rutgers fan.
I mean, he's probably the biggest Rutgers fan. And I met him through Danny Breslauer. They're both on an NIL collective that they asked me to be a part of for wrestling. And so through wrestling, I met all these great people and got all these great experiences that it did so much for me more than wins and losses. Like, yeah, I have some of my best memories are I won a couple state titles with my team in high school after not being very successful, and getting to see them accomplish a bunch of stuff alongside me is some of my best memories. Getting the experiences of going to college and getting to travel and wrestle at major universities in front of big duels and having 5,000 or 6,000 people at a match. Like, those are some things that I'll never forget.
And you were the color commentator for a while.
My
right?
senior year of college, I broke my shoulder and ended up having 2 screws put in it. And so they asked me if I would do an interview on a broadcast. And so I went up there just to talk for 5 minutes. And at the end, the kid, Danny Breslauer, he's like, yo, you're pretty good at this. Like, you want to talk about a whole match with me? And so I taught him wrestling because I didn't know much wrestling. And he taught me how to talk on camera and do commentary. And then it just kind of evolved, and I ended up doing it for 10 years. I did it on Big Ten Network, Fox College Sports, CBS.
Oh, wow.
You know, a bunch of different things.
Wow.
All Rutgers based generally, but got to call some of like really good individual matches, really good team matches, the national duels, the conferences. So it was fun.
Are you still involved in wrestling?
I'm very involved in wrestling. Yeah, I probably always will be. But I help coach a local club team, Triumph, with my son. I help run the rec program in Tinton Falls with a bunch of guys over there with my son, and then I volunteer coach at CBA too.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, I try to stay as involved as possible.
Nice. That's great.
It's awesome.
So let's switch back a little bit and just talk about the future of the profession, whether it's the recruiting profession or
Sure.
just the AEC profession in general. I get calls constantly from, let's call it recruiters. I don't know if they're actual people.
Sure.
Or they're either calls or emails or texts or whatever they are.
Yeah.
And it's, we can find you the best candidates for, half the cost, and
Sure.
because we're using AI.
Sure.
Right. And it's usually I hang up, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
So where do you see, there's always going to be that, right?
Totally.
It's people trying to maximize on some computer-aided version of what,
Sure.
what we all do. But where do you see AI, and in particular in what you do on a day-to-day basis?
We use a little bit of that actually. So I don't think you're ever going to find, back to like earlier in our conversation, where we're looking for the person that's not applying, that's very busy. I don't think AI is going to ever be able to get that person on the phone and have a conversation I don't think that's going to be where it progresses to enough. But what AI is doing now and will continue to do is make your tech stack more user friendly, and you can do things faster. So we might be able to do some of the scouting, and we have this now where we can put together broader tear sheets of people based on things that we plug into this system and let the AI kind of bring us our list, as opposed to always having to go find it manually.
Okay.
And so now a recruiter who would spend the first half of their week searching for names and phone numbers, they don't have to search for names and phone numbers at all. They have names and phone numbers the day they start on that position. So we're a couple days ahead, which would allow us to get to things faster. So we might be able to work on more jobs at one time. There's some jobs that you can use AI to do the first round of screening to narrow you down to the best dozen people, because maybe it's not a 10-year architect that's somewhat specific. Maybe it's the graduates where there's a bigger candidate pool. Maybe it's more administrative in nature where there's a bigger candidate pool for that. And so they can narrow you down to the dozen people, and then you can take those dozen phone calls instead of having to take 100 phone calls to get those dozen yourself. And so what I think it's going to do is it's going to make recruiters that use it well more efficient and more productive, which I actually think will help, because one of the things that drives people out of recruiting is it's a young person's game. A lot of recruiters are young in their careers. It's one of their first couple jobs. And it's commission-based. You get a salary in a lot of cases, but you make commission is how you're going to make the majority of your money. And so if you can be faster and more efficient, you can make more placements. If you make more placements, you're going to make more money.
Sure.
And so if you can get these young people to earn more faster, they're going to stay in the job. Because, I have a girl that works in my office who's really talented. She's young. She's been with me for 2 years. She made $96,000 last year. She's 24 years old.
Right.
It's not $1 million, but it's more than pick an industry: accounting, architecture, engineering, construction. What 2-year professional out of college is making $100,000? Right. They're not usually. So, and then if you can get them to do that, usually they'll stay because they're like, hey, I'm making good money. I'm pretty good at this. Yeah. And they progress, and all of a sudden they're like, when I got the recruiting job, it wasn't very cool or sexy. Like, my friends like, what's a recruiter? Like, kind of almost picking on you a little bit. And then 5 years later, I got all of them their jobs, and I made more money than a lot of them. And they're like, oh, recruiting's awesome. I got my job from it. You're doing really well from it, right? And so I think once they feel confident in what they're doing and they're making money, they stay, and then you're going to get a better product, because that recruiter is going to get better at what they're doing. They have bigger networks. They're going to know the game more. Right. Just make us better.
I'll tell you where I found respect for recruiters that I just thought of it as you were talking. One of my very first jobs, I'll leave all the names out of it, but one of my very first jobs, one of the designer's husbands was a recruiter. And she threw like a cocktail party or something. We were young. I mean, I wasn't married yet, so this is 25 years ago at least. And we went to their apartment, and they lived in Soho, and they had basically like a 3-story apartment, and with the most incredible, it was probably like a 10,000 square foot apartment.
Yeah.
Probably now it's worth like $100 million.
Yeah, right,
You know,
right.
like,
Just ridiculous.
It was absurd then, and it's probably way more absurd now. And I remember thinking, like, what is this?
Yeah.
And her husband is a recruiter for like he finds executive board members,
Sure.
things like that. It was
Right.
some
real high level
other
business.
level thing where I was like, wow, that's like a thing.
Yeah.
And it's clearly a very successful
right,
thing.
right.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
So I never, you can parlay this into something huge.
Yeah,
at some
definitely.
point, so.
I think it's a great career. I think you get to do a variety of different things. It's been fun for me. So, and now I get to see like these people build their lives faster. Like a lot of careers, you go 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 85.
Yeah.
In order to get big jumps, you got to leave.
You do. Unfortunately, you do.
And in this company, at my company, and in this career, you get what you do.
Yeah.
If you make more placements, you're going to make more money. If you make less placements, you're going to make less money, right?
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of the opinion out of it, and so people that like to have control and who are aggressive and not afraid of working, that's a great career for them.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, is there anything we haven't covered that you'd like to tell the listeners?
No, man, I'm really honored to be on. I've watched a lot of your episodes. And,
Awesome, thank you.
I'm happy to get to talk. I don't get often an audience to talk to the industry.
Yeah.
And I would say if anyone's out there listening and you work with a recruiter that doesn't sound like they're really giving you a high level of white glove service and concierging the whole thing, or even if you are and you want to, vet the process and really understand what goes into it, I'd love to talk to you. I think we do it differently. I think we do it better, and I think it's important.
Awesome. And yeah, to see more and read more, go to axstaffing.com and you'll see more. And then obviously your LinkedIn.
Yep.
Thank you, Sean, for being here. This was great having you on. There's a lot of tidbits of information in here that I think not only will help me as the business owner, but also obviously people, looking to take their career to the next level.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back and make some people listen to parts of this.
Nice.
So I really appreciate it.
Cool,
Thank
man.
you so
Thanks
much
for having
being
me.
on.
Yeah, appreciate
Awesome.
it.